Well, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that the U.S. apparently, now we've heard this many times before, but this time people are taking it pretty seriously. The U.S. is saying they're going to pull the troops out of Syria, which is great considering that, there wasn't even a legal war going on there. The U.S. invaded, Syria illegally. The invasion was illegal both in terms of international and U.S. law, because, of course, Congress not only did not approve any sort of invasion of Syria, they outright rejected it in Congress. It was a very unpopular move. No one wanted to be involved in the Syrian civil war on either side of the aisle, really. Even the Republicans, who were usually very hawkish, because Obama was president, they opposed any action in Syria. And now in terms of international law, the U.S. going into Syria was illegal because, one, they were not attacked by the government of Syria, so they had no right to intervene or to invade, like in a defensive war. And two, they were not invited by the government of Syria to intervene in this conflict. The Syrian government, was recognized by the UN, which was the government led by Assad, never asked the U.S. to come into their country and help them fight their wars, so the U.S. didn't have permission from the sovereign government. And three, again, also this is, and again, I'm citing these international laws because, the neoconservative and neoliberal establishment claims this is what they live by. This is what they care about. These are international norms. So three, they did not have a UN Security Council resolution authorizing an aggressive war, which is the only way, apparently, that, aggressive wars are supposed to be permissible under international law. And the idea is that you don't have situations like, Mussolini running out and grabbing Ethiopia just because Ethiopia is weak. But the U.S. has been operating, not only in Syria, but in many countries, but, we'll just stick to Syria here, against all those, against its own domestic laws and the international laws that it helped establish after the Second World War. And so, in principle, it is a good thing that the U.S. is now getting out of Syria and no longer involving themselves in that conflict. However, the way that the media is reporting that this is going to be carried out, and of course the media could just be wrong, because the media does, the media has been wrong about a lot of things, especially when it comes to foreign policy. They're terrible on that. But let's just, take for a second, assume that the reports are relatively accurate. That what the administration here is doing is that Trump had a phone call with Erdoğan of Turkey, the wannabe sultan of the Neo-Ottoman Empire, and he said to Erdoğan, hey, we're going to pull out of Syria, and you should just fill the vacuum. We're going to hand our little chunk of territory that we've conquered in Syria, or at least that we are kind of administering, because, of course, the U.S. troops were not the ones on the front lines, and I'll get to that in a second. But Trump made this deal with Erdoğan to give Erdoğan, for some reason, this chunk of northern Syria and say, hey, it's A-okay with me. You move your troops in, and this is your spot now. Now, of course, what I haven't mentioned is the people on the ground who actually are living in that area and have been fighting in that war on the U.S.'s behalf, and that, of course, are the Kurdish Peshmerga, I believe. Actually, Peshmerga might be the Iraqi Kurds. They're militia, but I think it's still called the Peshmerga in Rojava or northern Syria, whatever you want to call it. But and their other group is the YPG. So maybe it's the YPG and the Peshmerga is Iraqi Kurdistan. I think that's it. But definitely the YPG is in northern Syria. Sorry, there's so many of these Kurdish groups that I get them confused. The YPG, the PKK, the Peshmerga, and then the what's the one in Iran? I can't even remember them. But anyway, the Kurdish troops have been fighting as U.S. Proxies in the Syrian civil war. They've been fighting, the army. They fought and defeated the army of ISIS that the U.S. created, that the CIA created, which a lot of people, this is public knowledge, or maybe it's not public knowledge, but it's in the public domain. This is declassified, that the CIA wanted to create a Salafist principality in Syria to try and displace Assad. And for those of you who don't, follow technical language, a Salafist principality is a fancy way of saying a Sunni Islamic emirate or in this case, a Sunni Islamic caliphate, which is a little more, it's a higher up thing. But without getting into the intricacies of, Islamic political theory, ISIS is essentially what the intelligence community wanted to achieve. It was a way of them trying to displace the Shiites in Syria and to weaken their power. Now, of course, that all backfired when the army of ISIS, or whatever you want to call them, the ISIS fighters, the hordes, crossed the Sykes-Picot line into what is western Iraq and tried to become not just the Islamic State of Syria, but the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which is what ISIS stands for. They were actually the Islamic State of al-Sham, which is that's a Arabic term for the whole region of what in French and English is known as the Levant. But the borders don't line up exactly, but it's basically the Levant. So after this backfired, the U.S. decided, okay, we got to clean up this mess that we've created, and so they hired the Kurds and said, hey, we're going to give you arms so that you can try and fight for your independence, because you guys want to do that anyway, but at the same time, you have to take down ISIS for us, because we don't like them anymore. And so the Kurds did just that. They mopped up ISIS, and then they established their American Client State, which is I believe the full title is like the Federal Democratic Republic of Northern Syria. It's something really long and lanky like that. I actually kind of like their political model. It seems to be very, very local based and not have much of a central authority. But that's beside the point. Their little political experiment isn't going to go very far, because the U.S. has essentially sold them out to Turkey, which is very different than just saying that, oh, well, the U.S. is pulling out of Syria and now Turkey's going to move in. No, it's very clear that Trump is handing his Kurdish allies, who I don't think should be allies of the U.S. I don't see a reason why why we should be aligned. As far as I'm concerned, the U.S. just shouldn't have created ISIS to begin with, and then you wouldn't have had to work with the Kurds to mop them up. And frankly, stopping funding of ISIS also was, I think, did just as much, if not more, to cripple them. But anyway, back to the present. The U.S. could, pull out of Syria without completely leaving their allies to be slaughtered by the Turks, who are their sworn enemies. I should explain that a little bit. The Kurds are the Kurds are known as a stateless people, meaning that they're a nation without an actual state or government that represents them. There is no Republic of Kurdistan like there is, say, the Arab Republic of Egypt or the Republic of Turkey. The Kurds don't have their own government, their own state. So all the Kurds who are spread out across these different states in the Middle East, like Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, generally have at one point or another been engaged in insurgencies against their government, trying to win their independence. And so the Turks, they've been dealing for decades and decades with the PKK in eastern Turkey, because eastern Turkey is very Kurdish. And the YPG they see as an extension of them, because the Kurds kind of, even though there are differences between the Kurds in the different countries, but generally speaking, Turkish Kurds and Syrian Kurds are still kind of the same guys. They're at least friendly, even if they're not a part of the same organization. It's not the same structure. Neither of them like Erdoğan, and they're all, and Erdoğan considers them all to be his enemies. And the thing is that if the Kurds control northern Syria, that means that there is a Kurdish state on Turkey's border, and that's a threat to Erdoğan, because that can be used as a staging ground then to launch attacks against Turkey. That's the Turks' big national security concern here. Now, the reason why this hasn't really been a problem in the past is because historically, because this part of Syria was under the control of the Assad regime, both Assad, the younger Assad, and Assad the elder before him, that wasn't really a problem for Turkey, because, they had the troops of the Assad regime on the border there, and, the Kurds were, from what I understand, not really able to organize, cross-border raids against Turkey. And so that's why, this wasn't my idea. I think the first person I heard mention it was Scott Horton. But the easiest thing to do for the U.S. to pull out of Syria is just to, facilitate a deal between the Kurds and the Assad regime to bring them back into the fold. Now, of course, the U.S. doesn't want to do that because that'll look like, oh my gosh, Trump loves Assad, or whoever does it. If Obama did it, or the next president, nobody wants to look like, oh my God, you love Assad. But that's the only way the U.S. is going to get their troops out of there without letting Turkey move in, because the Kurds are not going to be able to defend themselves. Because they just don't have the arms, unless the U.S. literally was backing them in a proxy war against Turkey, which would be very dangerous because Turkey's a NATO ally. And so the U.S. still can't. They couldn't back a proxy war against Turkey. That's just not realistic at this point. So this is a very complicated issue, but I see no good out for the U.S. other than just letting the Kurds make a deal with Assad to bring Assad's troops back in, so that there is no at least technically an independent Kurdish state that can launch attacks and go to war with Erdoğan. You kind of want that thin line of Syrian troops keeping order there. Because if you don't have that, the result is that the Turks are going to move in and wipe out the Kurds, and they're going to probably resettle all the Syrian refugees that are in Turkey back in northern Syria. That's why Erdoğan is calling it a safe zone. He wants to conquer territory to put the refugees back in. And then this region will go, of northern Syria will go from being a Kurdish-controlled, largely, US client state to a Turkish client state. Probably something along the lines of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, because the Turks also invaded Northern Cyprus and established a breakaway government there. But of course, the Syrian Turkmen are a very small minority, so Erdoğan is not going to probably be able to establish a Turkish-dominated government in northern Syria. I guess perhaps he might be able to appoint a Turkmen to be, the dictator there, but it's not going to be Turkish as far as being a part of the greater Turkish nation. They don't speak, not enough people speak Turkish there, or I guess technically it's called Turkmen, but it's a Turkic language at the very least. Arabic is by far dominant there, and well, frankly, so is Kurdish, and I believe even is it Syriac or Aramaic? It's whatever the Christians have. The Christians have a language there. I believe they're the Assyrian Christians, although I might be mixing them up again with Iraq. The Middle East obviously is a very, very complex place. So yeah, I'm happy that the troops are out. Very happy about that, but still, this is not the way I would have handled the situation. Although it'll be interesting to see if, because it's very rare that you see borders change in the post-World War II era. It'll be very interesting to see if there is in fact a hard border drawn now between northern Syria and the rest of Syria that's now controlled by Assad. If the Turks really do try and establish a state there, that a breakaway republic from Syria that is under Turkish influence. I think that'll be interesting to see at the very least. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.